Every nutrition conversation for the last 40 years has pointed at sugar. But a body of peer-reviewed research published in journals including Nature and Cell is pointing at something else entirely. It is something in almost every processed food you own, something that gets far less attention than sugar, and something your label almost never explains clearly. Emulsifiers are the behind-the-scenes ingredients that give processed foods their smooth, stable texture. They work by keeping water and fat from separating, so products stay creamy or pourable instead of clumping or splitting. In the United States, two of the most common emulsifiers are polysorbate 80 and carboxymethylcellulose, which often appears on ingredient labels as cellulose gum. These names might sound technical, but they show up in everyday foods: ice cream, salad dressings, commercial breads, plant-based milks, sauces, and condiments. Without emulsifiers, your favorite oat milk would separate in the refrigerator, and many low-fat or dairy-free treats would lose their appealing texture. If you check the ingredient list on a random product in your kitchen, there is a good chance you will spot one of these names. Share what you find in the comments. How many of your go-to foods rely on emulsifiers for their look and feel? In 2015, Benoit Chassaing and his team at Georgia State University tested what happens when mice consume emulsifiers common in processed foods polysorbate 80 and carboxymethylcellulose, often listed on U.S. labels as cellulose gum, at levels similar to a typical human diet. For 12 weeks, the mice drank water laced with these additives. Under the microscope, the colon's protective mucus layer thinned by up to a third, allowing bacteria to move much closer to the intestinal wall, from about 30 microns in controls to just 12 microns after exposure. Confocal and electron microscopy captured these changes. The mice also showed mild signs of inflammation, with small increases in cytokines such as TNF-alpha and IL-6, and shifts in the gut microbiome toward more pro-inflammatory species. These results reveal a possible pathway, but whether the same thing happens in people remains uncertain. A small but carefully controlled human study in 2022 set out to test whether the patterns seen in mice might also appear in people. About 30 healthy adults participated in a 4-week trial, eating diets either low in emulsifiers or enriched to reflect the higher end of what is typical in the U.S. food supply. Researchers tracked changes in gut health markers before and after the exposure. The results showed a modest rise in zonulin, a protein linked to gut permeability, and subtle shifts in the microbiome that echoed the mouse findings. Certain bacteria became more common, while others, like Akkermansia muciniphila, declined. However, these changes were small, and they did not reach the level of statistical proof for inflammation. The study was limited by its short duration, its small group size, and the fact that it measured only indirect markers, not direct images of the gut barrier. As a clinician might caution, these early human signals suggest a possible link, but the evidence stops well short of proving harm from everyday emulsifier intake. Still, the consistency across species is enough to raise new questions about how food policy and labeling might adapt in the future. Polysorbate 80 and carboxymethylcellulose, the latter often listed on U.S. labels as cellulose gum, earned their generally recognized as safe status decades ago. At the time, safety meant passing classic toxicology tests, including high-dose animal studies, short-term feeding trials, and a search for obvious organ damage or cancer risk. No one had tools to measure subtle effects on the gut microbiome or the mucus barrier. The Food and Drug Administration's original evaluations did not and could not ask whether these additives might shift gut bacteria or thin the protective mucus layer. Each ingredient was reviewed on its own, not in combination with others, and cumulative exposure from eating multiple processed foods in a day was never part of the calculation. This gap has become a live policy question. Should the Food and Drug Administration now consider the total daily load of emulsifiers across the whole diet, not just single ingredients in isolation? Share your thoughts. Does this approach make sense, or is it overcomplicating food safety? A trip through a typical grocery store reveals just how often emulsifiers show up in everyday foods. Scan the ingredient lists on ice cream, salad dressings, pickles, packaged breads, granola bars, plant-based milks, low-fat yogurts, and sauces. Polysorbate 80 or cellulose gum appear in nearly every aisle. These additives are not limited to obvious junk food. They are found in products labeled as healthy, dairy-free, or gluten-free too. This means most people are exposed to small amounts of multiple emulsifiers, not just once, but several times a day, from breakfast toast to a late-night snack. Take a moment to check a label on something in your kitchen. How many emulsifiers do you spot, and share your count in the comments. The combined daily load may be higher than most people realize. A simple label check can make a real difference. Start by scanning the ingredient list for emulsifiers and look for names like polysorbate 80, cellulose gum, and sunflower lecithin. If you spot 2 or more emulsifiers in a single product, make a mental note. Then count how often these high emulsifier foods show up in your week. Nutrition researchers suggest aiming for no more than 3 such items weekly to keep your intake below the levels that triggered mucus thinning in animal studies. For those looking to swap, sunflower lecithin is a practical alternative. It is a natural emulsifier that works at lower doses and so far has not been linked to thinning the gut's protective barrier in published studies. Take a moment. Does this information shift your focus? Are you more concerned about sugar, or do emulsifiers now compete for your attention? Share your thoughts and invite a friend to try a clean label challenge with you. Today, every grocery run tests our label literacy. Will FDA weigh combined daily emulsifier exposure? Check one product for polysorbate 80 or cellulose gum. What matters more now, sugar or what holds it together?